Hello and welcome to episode 10 of the Infogol Football Betting Podcast. I'm Liam Kelly. I'm joined by Stephen Railston and Jake Pearson. I've gone through the midweek Champions League games there and not really much of note. Tuesday was pretty poor. I suppose the headline of the Wednesday action was Liverpool's defeat. I know you've got a stat about that to share, Stephen.
Yeah, we're just digging out through the data and it's been a confusing few days. I know Liverpool obviously rested players against Atalanta. But they recorded their lowest ever XG at Anfield since Infogol's records began in 2014. So that just shows how poor they were against the Italians. And obviously on Sunday, they recorded 4.35 XG. And that was the high XG created since October 2018. So it's been a few highs and lows, and it'll be interesting to see how they get on against Brighton on Saturday afternoon.
And Jake, you've done some previews for us this week on the Infogol side. What are you looking forward to this weekend as we turn our attentions there?
Yeah, Chelsea-Tottenham, standout fixture really, battle of the bridge. I know we're going to touch on that shortly, so let's kick on.
If you're new at the podcast, we're going to stick to the same format as usual, where we pick out our best bet or nap of the Premier League or Championship, then we move on to our best bet in Europe before ending with our lay of the week. I'll start with you, Stephen, just because your game's on Friday night with your beloved Newcastle. You just tell us your best bet of the week there?
Yeah, I don't think this is going to be the most exciting Premier League game ever. I think it's fair to say I'm siding with a Crystal Palace win versus Newcastle at 2.38. Now, I think I had high hopes for Palace actually, not at the start of the season, but they won 3-1 away at Old Trafford and I thought it was quite impressive, but they failed to kick on since then. And one positive is though that Zaha, he's picked up his form. He scored twice at Old Trafford and he's now scored 5 goals this season, recording 0.53 XG per average match. And he's already surpassed last season's total. But he's actually been ruled out of this game with coronavirus. He's isolating, poor lad. And that begs the question where the goals are going to come from. No other player at Palace has actually scored more than 1 goal this season. But there is a good omen. They've actually looked comfortable against teams currently in the bottom half this term. And they've averaged 1.58 X goals for per game against such opposition. And then that leads us nicely on to Newcastle, who are obviously in the bottom half themselves. They haven't won at Selhurst Park in 7 years. And I'm going to be as unbiased as I can here and just kind of rattle through things without being any bias. And Newcastle have conceded an average of 1.6 X goals against per game. And they've only actually ended 1 game this season with more possession. And if anyone's watched Newcastle this season, it's absolutely painful stuff. They sit so deep and it's absolutely mind-numbing. There's no direction. I don't think there's any purpose, and they fail to make any improvements under Steve Bruce. It really is pretty damning. And Liam picked out a good statistic in midweek in his analysis that Newcastle have actually averaged 0.83 non-penalty XG per game. And only Sheffield United and West Brom have averaged less. And I think it's inevitable, if they continue to play the way they have been, that they will be dragged into a relegation battle soon. So, to be honest, I think this game, it doesn't really suit Palace that Newcastle are going to sit deep, but I think they can just edge it. And like I say, it's not going to be a high-scoring game. It's not going to be a Premier League classic. I don't think there's going to be many goals. I could see the Eagles edging the game maybe 1-0. And Newcastle's attacking woes, I think they're just bound to continue. And I think it's going to be 3 consecutive defeats for Newcastle. So Palace at 2.38, and I wouldn't put anyone off for the under 2.5 goals, either.
Yeah, as a Borough fan, this is all music to my ears. There's a massive smile across my face right now.
Traveling in my pain.
Well, it's surprising to hear that those sort of numbers about bottom half teams against Crystal Palace, and usually we'd see them sort of sit in and be better on the counter-attack against better teams, but some encouraging numbers there for Palace, maybe not for Newcastle, but yeah, 38, sorry, that you said on the Betfair exchange there. It's a solid bet. We'll move on to you, Jake. Me and you got the same selection, I think, so I'll let you start off with that and I'll add my thoughts to it afterwards.
Yeah, nap is Chelsea to beat Spurs. So I backed Chelsea earlier in the week after the Infogol probabilities were ran, and we gave Chelsea a 57% chance of winning, which is about 8-11. So when I saw they were 5-4 on the machine, I gobbled that up. They have shortened since, but I still think there's a bit of juice in the price at about 2.16. We all know Chelsea are good going forward. They scored more goals than anyone else in the league this season, but they've actually got the best defensive record in the league according to XG. The 9.1 XGA they've conceded is better than any other team. I ran a little rolling XG graphic before I came on here, and it was like striking how improved they've been at the back. You can see like the game by game improvement, which is good because they're not just posting good XG numbers at the back throughout. They're getting better and better as they're gelling. So I just think they're too big. And then looking at this from sort of a Mourinho point of view, obviously Chelsea did the double over Tottenham last season. That was the first time any team have done the double over a Mourinho side in the Prem. But looking further back, Jose's never won at Stamford Bridge with an opposing team in the Prem. So all this, just positive signs for Chelsea. I just think massive value.
Yeah, I think you're right there because you've not said much about Tottenham, and I think that's right because I'm a little sceptical, probably because of last season, but there's not really much to go against them on. But it's more of a play on how impressive Chelsea have been this season. There's been a surprise defence, at least from the start of the season. We saw them be a bit more open, but I'll just run you through some numbers from when Edouard Mendy has started in the Premier League and Champions League this season. They've conceded 0.14 against Crystal Palace. Then I'll go through the other games quickly. It's 0.26, 0.78, 0.68, 0.48, 0.6, 0.88, 0.50, and 1.26 against Rennes in midweek. It just goes to show that how much more settled they look with Mendy in the goal. He's not having to do much, which is good, but it picked up a lot of confidence from just having him behind rather than Kepa. So
he's a better keeper than Kepa.
Would you agree that I think Thiago Silva, he's really impressed us. I didn't give him much hope.
Yeah, he's been better than I thought he was.
He's excelled, hasn't he? Exceeded expectations, I'd say.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you quickly mentioned the attacking process at the start there as well. I mean, Tammy Abraham coming in done really well. I think it's 0.58 XG per average match that we've got him at the minute. But even then, we've got Christian Pulisic and Kai Havertz in line to return this weekend. So I just think it's going to be a really good game. It's a heated rivalry, and at the price there, it just looks a really solid bet.
Yeah, I agree. Just before we move on, I just thought, because I'm new to the podcast, try and bring something new. So I wanted to talk about EV briefly. For anyone that doesn't know, expected value is basically a measurement. It's a way of measuring what you can expect to win or lose if you place the same bet over and over again. So I've just run the numbers on this, and the EV for Chelsea to win this match is £2.31 per £10 bet. So good numbers there.
That's why we picked Jake the big bucks.
There we go. Yeah,
latest transfer.
like you said, they were a bigger price at the start of the week, but now at 2.16, I think we'd all agree that is still a good value bet.
Yeah.
Stephen, can you just remind us of your bet then there, please?
Yeah, so I'm going for the Friday night game. I'm backing Crystal Palace win at 2.38 versus Newcastle.
Yeah, and me and Jake are both going with Chelsea at 2.16 currently on the Betfair Exchange. Just a reminder that you can check out our live interactive shop maps on our website, infogol.net, and the free app is available on the App Store and Google Play. Okay, let's move on to our next section, which is our best bet around Europe this weekend. Jake, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, okay. So I was going to tip Seville up against Huesca here, but the prices weren't really good enough. So I've gone for Nice. Don't really like tipping up odds on shots, but like the disparity in prices between what we think they should be and what they actually are is just too big. We've priced them up about 4 to 7 and they're just under 10 to 11 on Betfair. So I think it's just too big to ignore. And it's something that is a bit of a recurring theme with us and Nice. So I had a look back through some of the bets this season, and in their 10 matches they played, we've actually tipped them up 8 times. So if you would have backed them every time, you'd be, I think it's about 2.5 points profit from £1 level stakes. And you'd also be showing profit from last season as well if you would have followed our tips on Nice. So it just shows you like bookies don't seem to know how to price up a sort of mid-table French team. But also like from Dijon point of view, you know, the bottom of the league, 0 wins from 11 matches. They've got the worst defence in the league, according to XG. They're conceding 2.05 XGA per match. and they're the lowest scorers. They scored 5 goals this season. Next worst team is Bordeaux with 10. So I just feel like Nice are way too big here. And to back that up, I looked at some betting trends from Dijon this season, particularly away from home. And 2 matches that stood out were firstly against Strasbourg. So Strasbourg are currently 19th in the table. They played Dijon in September, having lost all 3 of their opening matches, yet they were still 1.63 to beat them. Second match is Bordeaux. They played each other in October. Bordeaux had won just 1 of their 5 matches prior to that, and they were 1.66 to beat Dijon. Nice doing pretty well this season, yet they're 1.88. So it just seems like they're too big there.
Yeah, I'm surprised to see that price as well. Just looking at Dijon's numbers alone, they're between less than 1 XG per game going forward and almost 3 in defence. So it's striking the numbers there. And
yeah, it looks big, doesn't it? And for anyone that wants to know, the EV for that match is £1.84 per £10 bet.
We'll move on to you there, Stephen. What have you got around Europe for us?
Yeah, I'm going for AC Milan to beat Fiorentina at 1.79 in Serie A. Milan, if anyone hasn't noticed, the top of Serie A this season, and they've won 20 points from 8 games, have been quite impressive. And they're averaging 2.50 x goals for per game. And only Roma are actually creating more chances per game than Milan, and that's only just marginally. They've also looked good in defence, not as impressive going forward, mind. They've conceded an average of 1.37 x goals against per game. And they've actually only conceded 8 goals, though. And Juventus and Verona are the only teams that have actually conceded less. So, look, their credentials are obvious. And they welcome Fiorentina to San Siro here. And Fiorentina have actually failed to score in the last 3 Serie A games, drawing a blank. And I know Liam's been there's been a running joke in the podcast. He's had quite a vendetta against Fiorentina, but there's been a reason for it. They have been quite poor. And they've created an average of just 1.26 goals for going forward. I'll just give a nod as well to Zlatan Ibrahimovic. He scored twice against Napoli. He took his tally to 10 goals for the season from 7.92 XG. And at 39 years old, I think it's quite remarkable he's doing what he's doing. He is actually ruled out of this game, which obviously is a negative, but Milan should have more than enough quality to find a way through and win this game. To be honest, I think 1.79 is quite a big price.
I agree with that. That is a good price there. I'm going to go to Spain for my bet here. It's Getafe against Athletic Bilbao. It's more of a play on Bilbao's poor away form, really. They've created only 4.4 XG in 5 games. Getafe have underperformed really badly this season. I think they're challenging for top 4 at one point last season. They're sitting in 11th, and on our expected table, they're sitting in 15th at the moment. So I expect them to improve a bit. We all know how pragmatic they are, but they're a tough team to face. And at 2.7 on the Betfair Exchange, I don't see why they're that big a price against a team that has struggled on the road. And although they have had a couple of decent results recently, at the start of the season, they were shocking going forward. And we all know on the day how good Getafe's defence can be. So I'm happy to take that at 2.7 on the Betfair Exchange there. Jake, can you just remind us what your bet of around Europe is there?
Yeah, my European nap is Nice to beat Dijon at 1.88.
Yeah, and Stephen?
Yeah, I'm in the Serie A. AC Milan versus Fiorentina at 1.79.
Yeah, and mine is Getafe to beat Athletic Bilbao at 2.7 on the Betfair Exchange. Like I say, all the prices quoted are from the Betfair Exchange. Another feature of the Betfair Exchange is the ability to lay a bet or back against something happening. So we've got some teams we're looking to oppose in our next section. I'll start with mine. My team that I'm looking to be against this weekend is Everton against Leeds. Last weekend, obviously, they were on BBC, so there was a lot more eyes on the Everton-Fulham match than there usually would be, but I was very unconvinced with Everton, to be honest. Like, as soon as Fulham put any pressure on them, even though they took a lead, they looked really bad. 0.08 XGF they created in the second half there and looked really rattled at the back. And that solidity at the back, or lack of, has been a pretty serious issue over recent weeks. They've conceded an average of 1.92 XG against per game in the last 6 matches there. I think that's a tendency that Leeds can really take advantage of here. They've been really good going forward this season, 1.6 XG per game. A bit unlucky to to beat Arsenal. I know Arsenal were down to 10 men, but even before that, I thought Leeds dominated them, recorded 2.01 XG and hit the woodwork 3 times. And that really is the strength going forward. They also have questions about the back line, averaging 1.68 XGA per game against. But I think a good display against Arsenal offers a bit of optimism that they can be better in that area. I was looking at the Leeds draw no bet, to be honest, just the way that the refreshing way that Bielsa's side plays, really. But I'm going to stick with Leeds or draw, or laying Everton here at 2.08 on the Betfair exchange. I think that's a really good bet there. I don't know if any of you have got comments on them. I know you've written the preview this weekend, Jay, for that.
Yeah, not a massive Leeds fan, but I see what you're saying. Like, Leeds aren't great at the back either, actually, but Everton are poor at the back. There's chances for Leeds there.
I just made the same points actually in my Betfair preview as well. Literally, I think everything you said, Liam, to the T basically. Both sides have got the questions over the defensive records at the moment, and I think Everton are quite vulnerable. That poor performance against Newcastle, and like you say, they weren't convincing against Fulham. So I think it's definitely Leeds can get a result.
Stephen, I know you've got the same selection here, so you can bounce off each other. Who's your late weekend?
Yeah, great minds think alike, and no doubt Jake will hop in with some golden nuggets once I've made a small little case here. But I'm laying Arsenal against Wolves at 2.20, 2.20. Arsenal have been very underwhelming this season. There was obviously high hopes under Mikel Arteta, and while things did seem to come together at the back end of last season, I don't think they've been that good this time around. The draw away at Leeds was obviously another poor result, but I think it's fair to say Nicolas Pepe's moment of stupidity ruined that game, and 70 million, he's been a terrible signing. I think it's probably fair to say. And mind the pun, but the Gunners on fire in this term. They're averaging 1.20 ex-goals for per game, and that's quite poor. And more worryingly, Aubameyang, what's happened to him? His sudden loss of form is a serious problem for Arteta, and he's actually only generated a 0.72 non-penalty XG in the Premier League. He scored 22 goals last season. He scored 2 goals this term, and I think that's just unbelievable, to be fair, what's going on there. Like, he's isolated out on that wing, and whether he's planning on moving him into the centre is debatable. I know he's mentioned it at his press conferences. But look, they're against Wolves, yeah, and they're one of the best defensive sides in the Premier League. Since their defeat at West Ham, which was really unusual for Wolves, it was a rare blip, they lost 4-0. I think it's fair to say they've been tremendous at the back since then, and they've improved, and they've conceded an average of just 1.10 ex goals against per game. And look, Arsenal, to be fair to them, have been more solid in defence as well. And I think this game is going to be quite cagey. I can see it being 1-1, and I can definitely see Wolves getting a result though. So I don't know if, Jake, you've got anything to add to that.
Yeah, I think you've stolen my notes there, because you've pretty much gone for everything I said. But yeah, so I've actually backed Wolves. There's a bit more value in laying Arsenal, but I back Wolves. The thing is, with laying Arsenal, you get the extra buffer of the draw, don't you? I'm not going to talk an awful lot about Arsenal because you've covered most of it, and you don't really need a lot of underlying numbers to see how bad they've been this season. The Aubameyang thing, yeah, I've got that down here. Yeah, what has happened to him? When you hang your hat on a player like Arsenal do with Aubameyang, when he goes through a blip, they haven't got anyone else to drag them out of the mire. But from a Wolves perspective, so I've been doing some data analysis on the Infogol model recently, and one of the main things I've taken from it is how well Wolves really tend to fare against the market. So had you backed Wolves every time we've tipped them up since they've returned to the Premier League, you'd be showing a 36-point profit to a £1 level stake. That's higher than any other team in that time frame. It just shows you, like, bookmakers still haven't really got to grips with how to price up Wolves. And I can kind of see why. Like, we've priced them up at roughly about 7-4. We've got them as favourites for this game. We've got Arsenal at 2-1. It'd take a brave bookmaker to price up Arsenal at 2-1 at home, but that's about what price they should be. But what's happened is they've got slashed, and now they're like 2.16 to win. I think you can lay them at 2.2. That's too short. I just think that's a good bet. EV on that bet is £2.10 per £10 bet.
Yeah, I completely agree with you with the way the bookmakers they almost can't open themselves up that much.
Yeah.
The Arsenal price, which is good news for people who want to lay Arsenal here. So we'll take it. We'll take these advantages anywhere we can get them. Just an addition on, like you both mentioned about Arsenal there, just an addition on the Wolves. Wolves have struggled away from home this season, but I don't think that's like a trend that's going to keep on happening. Because again, I think before the game on Monday, they were averaging 1.08 XGA per game at Molineux. I don't see why they can't translate that away from home pretty easily, especially when they've been one of the best defences the last couple of years in the Premier League. So,
yeah. The one worry I would actually have about Wolves in this match is Wolves tend to perform really well against really good teams, and I don't think Arsenal are a good team at all. Wolves are really good at soaking up pressure and then hitting on the counter. I don't know if Arsenal are good enough to pressure Wolves. I don't know what's going to happen because I just don't think Arsenal are good enough to dominate this game. I think Wolves might have to come out and be a bit more aggressive.
I think that's a fair comment. Sorry, Liam. I backed Wolves last time when they hosted Arsenal at Molineux. But I'm just looking, yeah. They've played Arsenal obviously 4 times since returning back to the Premier League. They've won once, drew twice, and lost 1. So I think that's a pretty good record, and they are a difficult team to play against. And yeah, honestly, I think this is one of the bets of the weekend for me.
Yeah, I do as well. Yeah.
What I will say on them notes there about Arsenal not being good enough, it doesn't really matter whether we think that they're good enough or not. It's whether they think they're good enough and whether they do want to hit the ball and not.
Yeah.
I think they will think that they're a step above Wolves and dominate the ball, and that would come out the wash as good for us there. So all aligned on the bet here. It's not often that we do suggest some odds against lays, but I think we're all of mind that this is a pretty strong lay. So at 2.2, I think that is your 2 lay of the weekend, and I'm not going to oppose you either.
We'll be sipping champagne on Sunday night, won't we, Jake?
Certainly will.
We'll see. Okay, so that's it for the Infogol football betting podcast this week. I'd like to say thanks to Stephen and Jake for jumping on here. I know you've been busy this week.
I think it's been an outstanding debut from Jake, and quite like to see him joining on a permanent contract in January. We can see what we can.
We'll see how the bets go this weekend before we start offering contracts out.
Yeah, all style, no substance.
Well, thanks anyway, guys, and don't forget that you can check out our match previews, analyst verdicts, tips for the majority of leagues or the major leagues on our website, infogol.net, or our free app, which is available on the Apple Store and Google Play. And we'll see you next week for the next one.